Welcome back to Leadership Moments with Apostle Martin Wilson. I'm your host and facilitator, Billy Ryan. I believe that we are really in for a treat today, and each and every time Apostle Wilson comes to the mic and takes your questions and shares his wisdom. Who is Apostle Wilson? What qualifies him to come to this platform, you ask? Apostle is an author, speaker, and he holds a master's degree in theology. Outside of religious accomplishments, Apostle has earned the distinguished honor of being a certified master practitioner in the areas of life and relationship coaching, law of attraction, neuro-linguistic programming, and Reiki. On top of all that, Apostle Wilson brings with him 30 years of pastoral ministry and counseling. He is the current senior pastor and establishmentarian of Exalted Word Ministries in Charlotte, North Carolina. Apostle Wilson, welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you for this opportunity.
Our question today comes from a leader out of Quebec, Canada. It reads, as a bishop and pastor that oversees other leaders and ministries around the world, it seems as if I am never able to really get ahead. When I am not on the phone or traveling for speaking engagements or meetings with leaders, I find myself having to put out the next fire in my own local assembly. My question is, when you know that you are doing what you are called to do, how do you keep burning the candle at both ends of the stick without burning out? Apostle Wilson, I believe that this question speaks to all leaders, not just those in Christendom,
Yes, it does.
but the secular world also. What wisdom would you give us about how do you fulfill your calling without burning out?
Well, Ryan, I would have to say that the first thing that come to mind when you gave me this question was a scripture out of the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, that talks about Satan trying to wear out the saints. And the proper interpretation of that is he tries to weaken or diminish the power or the effectiveness, if you will, of the saints of God. And then when we relate that to us as leaders, what better way to attack an organization, to attack a ministry or church, than to weaken the leader? And one thing that is really hard for us as leaders, but we have to put them in place. Dr. John Maxwell calls them margins. And example of that is, if you remember, you guys remember when you were in school, you had the paper like this. This is the margin, the part that you don't write in. This is the margin. You've got to have margins in your life. You've got to margins. When I say margins, I'm talking about the space between what you're doing and the limits of what you're capable of doing. Those boundaries, those margins have to be really clear. The margin is the space where the leader takes that time and spends that quality time thinking and being creative. You've got to have that time. The greatest reason for burnout is not the physical stress that comes along with ministry as much as it is the mental stress. And organizations always suffer when the leader does not have margins between what they're trying to do and the limits of what they can do. This is where, when you have those margins, that's the place where the mental stress subsides. You're taking that time to rest. You're taking that time to think. You're taking that time to be creative. And without proper thinking, without proper time for thinking and creative time, eventually you will lose your leadership. You will lose your leadership. Why? Because a leader is only the leader because he or she sees more. This is where I got this from Dr. John Maxwell. Sees more, sees before, and sees greater than the people that they lead. And when you don't have those margins in place, that ability to do that is not as keen as it could be. I found that when I have time to think, when I have time to think creatively and think of new ideas, I found that I find more creative ways and easier ways to accomplish the task that I need to do. you're more likely to be what I call a multiplier. And I mention this every week. Multipliers are those that add value to other people, because when you're a multiplier, you're adding value to other people. So during your creative time, the ideas that you're going to get are going to be so big. You're going to have to develop other people so that you can be able to accomplish. You won't be able to accomplish all of it by yourself. So a margin is the place where, because you're thinking, because you're meditating, because you're taking that creative time, you're able to do less and accomplish more. Let me say that again. You're able to do less and accomplish more because you're taking that downtime, if you will. And that only happens when you clearly define the margins in your life. And margins are what you can, margins make you look better than what you really are. You can take an average leader and margins will give him an edge. There's a lot of great leaders that don't see themselves as great. They're simply leaders that have put margins in their life. They have put boundaries in their life, and it makes them more productive than the person that is really on the same level that they are. So usually when you find a leader that doesn't have margins in place, they will appear to be very busy. They will appear to be super busy, but in reality, most of the time, they're at the mercy of other people's agenda. They're at the mercy because they don't have margin. These leaders are leading, but most of the time, their agenda is being directed and guided by needy people. And so what happens is the needs of people starts controlling the direction of the organization. So in the last 4 minutes that I have, let me give you 3 steps for setting margins. Number 1, you got to see the importance and the benefits of setting margins. You got to see it. You got to see it. You get the key to increasing your mental energy. Your mental energy and being renewed is for you to set margins in your life. We've heard of writer's block. Well, the key to not having creative block as a leader is to set margins in place. Give yourself time to think and do that creative thinking that is needed. Every leader needs that. Number 2, you have to prioritize your day. I need you guys that will. Some of you have heard of it. John Maxwell talks about the 80-20 principle. I need you to look up the 80-20 principle. What is the 80-20 principle? Says that 20% of your work is going to give you 80% of your productivity. So that means that we don't want to find ourselves doing a lot of busy work. We want to be doing that 20% that's going to give us 80% of our productivity. Number 1 was you've got to see the importance. Number 2, you've got to prioritize your day. And number 3, you've got to learn the magic word that I taught and teach at Exalted Word. You've got to learn how to say no. And at the risk of sounding like I'm not compassionate, but everyone else's needs cannot control you and should never control you as a leader. It does not mean that we don't care about the needs of people, but we can't be controlled by the needs of people. Jesus said the poor or the needy or the needs of people. You're always going to have those people around you, and you can't be controlled as a leader by those things. So my word to you, Bishop, Apostle, to answer this question, you've got to see the priority of setting margins in your life.
Apostle, thank you again for sharing your timeless wisdom and knowledge with us. I believe that if leaders will take this information and apply it, that it can greatly increase their productivity and longevity.
Yes, I believe that to be true.
You have been watching and listening to Leadership Moments with Apostle Martin Wilson. If you have leadership questions that you would like for Apostle to give insight on, please text your questions to 980-389-4114. That's 980-389-4114. Until next time, as Apostle Wilson says, God is the greatest power and you are not defeated.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, and our new dedicated Roku channel.
Sponsored by Billy Ryan Life and Executive Coaching, and the Ecclesia Ecumenical Leadership and Church Growth Development Network. Executive Producer, Billy Ryan.